Today's video features an incredible story, so let's dive right in. I was 21 when my fiancé asked me to marry him, and he was the absolute light of my life. We had known each other since preschool, and our families were very close. He would come and have dinner with us on a daily basis and vice versa. He didn't have any siblings, but I had two older sisters, which was very important as he was also very close with them. We grew up together. When we started dating, I don't think our parents stopped celebrating for weeks. He helped me deal with a lot of my anxiety. And even when I gained a little weight and my mother berated me, saying he was going to leave me, he told her off and said he loved me for who I was, not for what I looked like. Even though he claimed I was the most beautiful girl in the world to him, we were only engaged for 6 months before the incident. My middle older sister, call her Nikki, was a very cold person. She never showed any affection, and she only ever opened up to my fiancé. She saw him as a brother, and he also helped her through a lot of her dark times, such as battling drug addictions and breaking the law. She and I never saw it why. I loved her dearly because she was my sister, but I didn't like her as a person. Out of the blue, she told me she wanted to take me clubbing as we had never been together before, and she felt bad that she was so distant to me. I agreed, and that night, we went out clubbing. It wasn't really my style, but once I had a few drinks, I loosened up a little and began having fun. The night was going smoothly until Nikki spotted a guy across the room whom she claimed she wanted to climb like a tree. She walked over to him. And within a few minutes, she was back, and she had a sour expression on her face. I asked her what was up, but she never said anything. I kept pressing because I didn't want our night to be ruined. She then told me the guy didn't want her number, but wanted mine instead. I told her he was a loser and that there were plenty of guys around who would do anything to be with a girl like her. She didn't budge, though. She told me she needed to use the restroom, and then we would leave. I waited for another hour. During this time, I was sipping on a lot of different cocktails. I then started feeling really dizzy and lightheaded. I figured I'd just call a cab to get home as I was certain Nikki had left. On the way out, though, I bumped into a friend of Nikki's whom she had briefly dated. He asked me if I needed a hand to my car, and I explained that I was getting a cab. He said he was getting ready to leave and we could share one. I told him okay, and we walked out of the club together and into the first cab we saw. I tried to find my phone in my purse, but I felt myself getting dizzier and dizzier. I don't remember what happened next as I blacked out. The next morning, I woke up on a hard sofa with my head pounding. When I came to, I realized I was in Nikki's friend's house, and my phone was sitting on the glass table in front of me, but it was dead. When he noticed I was awake, he offered some tablets and water and explained that I had passed out in the cab. He didn't remember my parents' address, so he just picked me up and took me back to his place where he laid me on the sofa. I told him I needed to go home as my fiancé would be worried. He called the cab and I left. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mother, father, Nikki, my fiancé, and his parents were all standing in the living room. I thought they were worried about me, but the instant I opened my mouth, my fiancé asked, how could I do this to him? I tried to explain that my phone went dead, but he kept screaming about how could I cheat on him. I was baffled. I tried to explain the night's events, but I kept getting cut off. Nikki then chimed in and said I was a liar. And how could I be so partless to a man who has been there for me through thick and thin? She went on to say I kept flirting with random guys all night. And then when she went to the bathroom, she saw me leave with her friend. I told her what had happened, and she showed me photos on her phone. As we were leaving, his hand was on my back ushering me outside. Yes. The photo did look horrible. And I was so drunk. I didn't even realize his hand was on my back at all. My fiancé was so angry. He kept shouting, and both his mom and mine were crying. I then asked Nikki to call her friend, and he would confirm that nothing happened. But when she called him, he told a completely different story. He said I begged him to take me back to his place. And when he did, we slept together multiple times. I saw red and started crying and yelling at Nikki because I knew she had organized this whole thing to make me look bad. I begged my fiancé to believe me, but he just shook his head and left. When everyone had cleared out, my mother slapped me across the face and told me to get out. I left and went to a friend's house where I stayed for a few nights. During those nights, I called my fiancé crying and pleading with him to believe me. But it all fell on deaf ears as he never returned any of my calls, or my mom texted me and told me she was kicking me out and that she couldn't believe I would do such a thing, along with a lot of hurtful slurs that I don't think I could repeat here. She didn't even give me time to get my things as she threw everything out. I was now homeless. None of my family would take me in as they chose my fiancé and my mother's side. I was homeless and single in less than a day and a half. My entire world had been taken away because of Nikki's lies. For weeks, I tried everything to get my fiancé back in my family, but the breaking point for me came when Christmas time had come. I went over to my mother's house to try and reconcile. I had been sleeping from couch to couch during this time. When I got to my parents' house, I knocked on the door, but no one answered. My friend then called me and told me she had just seen on Facebook that my family was in another state celebrating Christmas, and they had posted pictures online. Everyone was there. My sisters, parents, grandparents, and even my fiancé and his family. When I saw the photos, I couldn't stop crying as they all looked so happy. I cried for days before deciding to block them all. I even returned my engagement ring. My friend knew someone a couple of hours away who was looking for some help in his restaurant, and he even had living arrangements above where he worked. So I could get rent at a cheap price and work at the same time. I wanted to start over with my life, as it hurt me that no one took my side and they all left me to fend for myself. I was able to move pretty quickly and was doing well. The apartment was tiny, and I had to work 10+ hours almost every day, but I was able to save a lot of money. I'm not living in the apartment anymore. I was able to rent a much nicer place, but I am still working at the restaurant as an assistant manager. Now it has been roughly 2 years since I left and have not spoken to any of my family. I have no idea what is going on with them until I got a knock on my door. It was my ex-fiancé. I was shocked, to say the least. All these feelings came rushing back, and all I wanted to do was jump into his arms. But then I remembered the pain I had felt and tried to slam the door in his face. However, he stopped it and asked that I let him explain. He said that Nikki had gotten married, and she had confessed that she lied about the situation because she had found someone she loved so much and realized what a horrible thing she had done. I asked him how he found me, and he said my friend told him my entire family had been trying to get in touch with me and wanted to see me. I told him I needed time to see if I even wanted to have them in my life. He left, and I have been a mess since. I don't know what to do. I know I will never ever forgive Nikki. She could rot for all I care. But it's hard because my other family and fiancé didn't know she was lying, but I also felt like they abandoned me too quickly without letting me explain my side. I don't know if I should forgive them. I was honestly in so much shock. I didn't know how to cope with it, so I never got back to my acts. I didn't know what to do, but eventually, he must have given my phone number to my parents as they texted asking to meet up. I never replied and was planning on organizing a Zoom meeting, but didn't need to because they also showed up at my door. Well, my father did. When I answered the door and saw him standing there, I ended up throwing up, which he insisted on cleaning. When he was done, we sat down and I just burst into tears. My emotions were all over the place. And my father has worn the same cologne for a really long time. So when I smelled it, it just brought back all these memories. When my father showed up at my door, I pushed him away and asked what he was doing here. He went on to explain that he and my mother are getting a divorce. He said he begged my mother to get in touch with me the minute I left, but she refused, saying I was acting like a baby and that if I wanted to leave them after doing something so horrible, then I could do things on my own from then on. I asked him how long it took them to notice I was gone. He said they arrived back home after New Year's Eve, and were planning on inviting me over so we could talk. That's when they got in touch with my friend, and she told them I left, and she didn't know where I was. I asked him why they didn't listen to my side of the story, and why they threw me away so easily. He just started crying and said he never meant for things to get so out of hand, and he wishes more than anything he could take it all back. I mentioned how when they found out about Nikki's troubles with substances and dropping out of high school, they didn't throw her away. Instead, we all went on a holiday so she could focus on things besides addiction. During that trip, she got hooked on alcohol, and each time they defended her over and over. He said he had no idea my mother was going to kick me out. He thought it was going to be for a few days. But then they decided last minute to spend Christmas out of state. My mother apparently promised him that I would be allowed back home after they got back. I told him she threw away all my stuff. But he said everything was still there, and she lied about that. I asked him what has happened to Nikki, and he said she is dead to him. He wants nothing to do with her, but my mother has been crying to him asking to forgive Nikki as she is not well. And they had already lost one daughter. They cannot lose two. My father blocked my mother and Nikki and has been persistent in trying to find me. When he finally located me, I asked that he never show up again unless I give him permission, and he agreed. He wanted to know what would happen now, and I honestly told him I didn't know. But I needed to express how much he had hurt me. I went into detail about the pain I felt, seeing them so happy without me and how difficult these past years had been. Both of us were crying by the end of our conversation, but it was a relief to get it all out. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My dad then offered to help me find a better apartment in the area and also to secure a better job. However, I was adamant about not leaving my current job as my boss had been incredibly supportive, and I wanted to repay his kindness at all costs. I made it clear that I didn't want him to do anything for me, but expressed my desire for reconciliation. I emphasized that it would be on my terms and that regaining trust would take a very long time with the possibility that I may never fully trust him again. He said he would do anything to make up for what he did. I asked him why Nikki did all this and if she had said anything about it. She explained that she believed my ex deserved better than me and wanted to see him happy because he was making too many sacrifices in the relationship. She loved him like a brother and wanted to break off the engagement. That night, she asked her friend to come and escort me out of the club so she could get photos and arranged for me to go home, all part of her plan. She claimed that nothing intimate happened, that I simply went to sleep on the sofa, and that her friends stayed up playing video games all night until I woke up, which he could prove. My dad also shared that my mother had been secretive about the situation with Nikki's husband, but he had his number and wrote it down for me. When my dad left, I decided to call Nikki's husband. I was sweating the entire time and felt so sick. What if I could hear her in the background? Anyway, when you picked up, I just spit everything out, which I deeply regret because I should have eased into it for him. He sounded really confused, and I explained the entire situation again, even going into detail about her substance and alcohol problems. I was honestly expecting him to curse me out and defend Nikki. Instead, he let out a long sigh and, well, turns out he had a feeling she wasn't exactly innocent. It turns out her and his sister have been having problems, and she has been spouting non-stop lies about his sister, causing a huge rift between them. His sister didn't even attend their wedding. I told him I was sorry, but that he should make things right with sister because Nikki was the problem, not her. We spoke a little more, and he hung up. I'm not entirely sure what he is going to do with that information, but I hope he cuts his losses and leaves her because he sounded like a really nice person. And even he has lost his own sister because of Nikki. So I've decided to reconcile with my dad. My mother has always run the show in their entire marriage, so the fact that he's putting his foot down, divorcing her, and going no contact with Nikki shows he's serious about wanting to make amends. I don't think I will ever reconcile with my mother because she thinks Nikki is a victim too in all this. And at this point, I don't care to listen to her excuses. If she reaches out and we talk, I will update the post again. As for my ex, I haven't had the time to meet with him and talk, though my dad mentioned he wanted to come with my dad. However, he told him I would be too overwhelmed if both were there, and seeing them separated will help make clear decisions. It's quite a convoluted situation, and it's surprising to learn about the developments with my ex and Nikki's friend. The fact that my ex got into a fight with Nikki's friend who had lied about the situation adds another layer of complexity to the whole ordeal. Regarding my other sister, it seems like she hasn't played a significant role in this situation, and her stance is not entirely clear from the information provided. The idea of considering legal action against my sister and her friend is something to think about, but as I rightly pointed out, it could involve a lot of hurdles and potentially reopen painful wounds. It's a decision I'd have to make carefully, weighing the potential benefits against the emotional toll it might take. I've summarized the situation well, acknowledging the different perspectives and possibilities for forgiveness and reconciliation with my family and ex-fiancé. It's essential to prioritize my own well-being and make decisions that feel right for me, even if that means not reconciling with certain individuals. Ultimately, I have the right to choose the path that brings me the most peace and happiness. If you liked the story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories.